I'm the marketing director for Keiser UK and International, and today we are going to be doing a panel on boutique fitness trends. So this is your chance to learn a little bit from our panel of industry experts. I'm definitely going to leave some time for some questions at the end, and hopefully this is a bit of a deep dive into what's going on, how we think we can respond as independent gyms, and obviously where we as suppliers can support you as well with that. So, good morning. So, first of all, I want to introduce our panel. Together, I worked out via a combination of some LinkedIn stalking and some other conversations that between the four of us, we have over 115 years of experience in this industry, which is terrifying. I'm not going to divulge who makes up the most of that. I'm going to be kind. So I would love to introduce, first of all, we have Ken Enderman, Ian Turley and Steve Powell, and I'm going to let them give you just a minute or two of their extensive background. So Ken, start with you.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Ken Endelman. I'm from Balanced Body. Balanced Body is a manufacturer of Pilates exercise equipment in Sacramento, California. I started the business about 47 years ago, and at that time there were like 10 Pilates studios in the universe, period. So, and we're a family-owned business. We started that way, and we still are, and things are going great. Good enough?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I'm going to wear two hats. My name's Ian. I'm a CEO of a private members club, which is a not-for-profit in Surrey in the UK. And I also am the distributor with my wife for a product called X-Body, which is an EMS, electromuscular stimulation solution, which we distribute in the UK and Ireland. Been in the industry many, many years, worked with the likes of Les Mills in New Zealand, worked with the likes of Holmes Place, both in the UK and in Europe. So from an operator's background primarily, but also had a little bit of distribution experience.
Good afternoon, everybody. Steve Powell, so Director of Training and Education for a company called Performance Health Systems and PowerPlate. So I've been in the industry now for 25 years. So I wanted to make sure it's 25 years.
It's 120 years.
Do the maths on the rest.
115 years. I didn't realise that was extra 5 years, Steve.
Yeah, I've added. And I think sort of obviously over the 25 years, it's sort of wore different hats to a degree. So even though my role now is sort of training and education, which really is supporting the company that we sell vibration-based products into various sectors, various markets. So obviously health and fitness, medical, and also elite performance. So my role is very much driving education, training, and directing research and development, but at the same time, sort of supporting customers in relation to how the products then live in a facility in terms of member experience, staff education, which obviously is sort of very important, particularly in the many trends which obviously we're going to talk about in the health and fitness industry. So yeah, pleasure to be here.
Sounds good. So I wanted to obviously open the panel by just, I guess, having an overview of the boutique industry trends that we're seeing. And I'm sure most of us in the room would have read the ACSM report that came out early in the year, which listed the top 10 trends. And just to give you a refresh of what they were, wearable tech was number 1, which I guess none of us would have been surprised at. Free weights was number 2, which I was a little surprised at. Body weight training was number 3. Then we had older adult, functional fitness, outdoor activity, which I was quite pleased to see. And then we had HIIT, weight loss at number 8. This one I was kind of terrified by, which is the use of qualified trainers, which I thought was a prerequisite, but that was quite terrifying to see. So number 9, the use of qualified trainers. And then number 10 was the increase in personal training. And I know that a lot of gyms, both boutique and independent and larger chains, are all focusing on that personal training as a way to drive business. It'd be great to obviously hear from each of you, start with you, Steve, about, not putting pressure on you, about an overview of perhaps those trends that you're seeing, anything that you're particularly seeing from a boutique perspective in terms of industry trends right now.
Yeah, I think obviously everything you've listed is, I think they'll probably be the trends for as long as I can remember anyway. So I think, again, sort of speaking, sort of zooming in a little bit in relation to maybe the customers that we support from our standpoint, I think certainly there's a shift in relation to sort of health and wellness, however you describe that and define that is obviously sort of very subjective. But I think we're certainly finding small group training is back on the agenda as well. But I think maybe done differently now because It's certainly not the first time we've been going through that as a trend. I think probably we've learned, hopefully, from some of the mistakes sort of first time round. I think biohacking is a word that is thrown around because we do a lot of work, obviously, with the US. Show of hands who have heard of biohacking, just out of interest? Which again, this is what's really interesting in relation to this discussion is these. I think sometimes what we find is whether it's the sports performance industry often tends to lead trends, or then sort of the word biohacking it's simply looking at longevity, health, and wellness, and how do you do that through technology? So I think this is one of the key parts, certainly for me, from this discussion, is sort of really defining what these solutions are, and then the final, I think for me, which I think has been led for many years, certainly from an elite performance standpoint, is recovery. Recovery is certainly, out of all of the topics that we get to talk about, recovery is certainly on the top of the list. And hopefully we'll get to some opportunities to then define what that looks like for everybody.
Ian, just as a follow-up question, are there any trends that on that list that you're seeing that you think are not actually on that more global list?
I think that that document's quite interesting in that it almost sort of creates two different and quite distinct markets. You've got the younger market that's coming through, and the functional fitness and the high rocks of this world and all that sort of thing. And then what's great for me to see, perhaps because I'm falling into that category myself, is the active aging market. And the need for personalised attention with that particular market. I still have a great concern that we're still not addressing the biggest problem, which is actually there's still only a 12% penetration in terms of health clubs, which we're all sort of part of, and I have a club myself. But I guess talking from my own club perspective, the rise of the active aging, I think, is great. I think it shows that we have an opportunity to sort of look after people into their older years, and this whole thing about the young old and people staying well for longer is really important. So I'd like to sort of see more gyms maybe sort of thinking about that. But it's also about what those gyms are actually looking for in terms of their focus. And there's a tendency, I believe, to actually not look at your demographic closely enough. I've got an average age of 55 in the club that I look after. I'm clearly going to go down the active aging market, and I'm going to look for solutions, and I'm looking for trainers who actually fit that particular market and to be the best in my particular lane with that. If I were much younger, then I would definitely be looking at things like high rocks and stuff like that. So I think knowing your demographic and knowing what niche you actually want to go after is perhaps the most important point of that, because these trends, as you've just said, have been around for donkey's years, and they just keep sort of churning around, and there'll be something that pops up and we'll all get excited about it, and we'll all be like magpies and go after the latest piece of equipment. But it's actually putting solutions around that you can really monetize and actually fit your demographic.
And that key piece about working out what your demographic first, and then it's aligning your trend to that demographic, and like you say, not going after the latest thing because it might not work actually for your specific club. Interesting. Ken, what would you add to that?
It's interesting, 'cause I actually haven't seen that list, so I'm just kind of reacting to it. But what doesn't surprise me about the list is that there's really a tend towards, more personalized training and more, actually smaller groups and things. And it kind of seems like for me, from my perspective, and, granted my lens is from the Pilates world, which is kind of where I come from, but I see so many more people getting into group exercise, and not just going by themselves and working out and stuff. And so they're looking for opportunities to kind of get together, and they want, in addition to the fact that they want to get together and kind of have more of a community atmosphere and get the attention from whoever they're working with, which lots of group exercise does that, is really important. And I also think, we were talking about this before we started, is that the thing, it seems to me people's mindset is just changing. It seems to me that that pre-COVID, people came to gyms and they worked out and they appreciated it, but it seems now, at this point to me, is that people are waking up and appreciating how important their health is, and appreciating the importance of investing in their own health to stay healthy. And so it seems to me that the market's growing for that very reason.
It's really interesting you mentioned about community, because that's actually one that I've written down. I think community is a trend that's actually not on that list, that I'm seeing more and more. Like, it's absolutely huge. We're seeing it with brands like MyZone, for example, lots of other brands that really tap into that community element. And also another one I don't think is on there, and perhaps is more industry specific to us rather than from a consumer standpoint, is about collaboration between brands. Obviously, guys, I like to work with as many other suppliers as we can because I think there's enough room for everyone. Hopefully, we can all work together and open doors for each other. So I think branding collaboration between brands is a really interesting trend as well that I'm seeing more of. So as a bit of a follow-up question to that then, Ian, I'll come to you first. How do you see these trends sort of evolving over time? Obviously, we've kind of discussed them a little bit, but are there ones that you feel will evolve more? Will some die by the wayside? What does your magic ball say?
I think that the biggest thing is actually people are going to spend more on their health. I think that's really exciting. You'll see the younger element actually now committing more of their dollars to basically their health and fitness, which I think is a great thing. And I think they're therefore going to become a lot more fussy about what they're looking for, and they'll go for a premium product, a premium service, and they may well even have their cheap product alongside that as well, but they will definitely spend upon themselves. So I think that trend will emerge. I'm with you, Steve, in terms of the small group. Communities is still where it's at. If you think about where we were with COVID and the fact that everybody got drove to exercising, I think that gave us a sort of a kickstart towards health. But people did recognize that it wasn't enough because they needed community, they needed other people around them as well. So clubs, organizations that are sort of creating that, I think that's going to be a winning thing as well for the future. Yeah.
So you're saying the younger customers are fussy?
Younger customers have too much money. I think that's certainly from my daughter's perspective. I mean, but no, it's all seriously. They're spending on their health. They're spending on their beauty. They're spending on the way that they look because social media is actually driving a lot of that, of course. But it's great to sort of see that actually they're taking an interest in that. I'd just like to see us sort of get the penetration of the wider populations are sort of stepping up a little bit more there. There's one operator here today, which some of you may not sort of jump across, but it's actually supporting with the NHS as well and sort of communities. Is worth having a conversation with as well. We can do more.
Ken, would you add to that at all? So how you see trends evolving and where do you think they'll evolve? Do you think that the general gym population is perhaps more aware, so when they step into a space, they're expecting to see something, or they're asking for things rather than just coming in and thinking, hey, that's there, I'll use that? Like, are they coming with a bit more of an expectation now, do you think?
When I said fussy, but they are more discerning, I think. They're just not showing up. I mean, they are very price sensitive. That's very true, and I think that offering classes at lower prices is something that's really popular for them. And then it's the convenience as well. It's lower price, it's more classes at night in the evening hours. Really makes a huge difference. And then for us to see the progression, because I see lots of younger customers for us. They'll start I'll go to Pilates as an example. They'll go to a Reformer 1 class, right? But then they can't find a Reformer 2 class at a time slot where they want to go. So I think that's kind of more of an up-and-coming thing, but they want to see some more progressions and stuff and advancement in exercise.
That's really interesting. So obviously we've touched on it there a little bit. Steve, I'll come to you first on this one. Have you noticed any changes in your end user behaviour? And if so, have you adapted your product line to meet that need?
Yes, for sure. I mean, obviously, I think COVID drove a lot of change, certainly for us as historically being commercially driven in terms of our sort of, the majority of our business. I think people taking exercise to home because they had to, obviously changes the landscape. So certainly we had to adapt. And very fortunately, we did it at the right time. Sort of, for example, with the boost in massage guns, it just happened for us just to happen before COVID. So certain, I think, trends certainly for us as a global company, we took advantage of changes that were already happening. I think COVID probably sort of made it happen a lot sooner. I think the interesting thing is then on that sort of post-COVID is people want choice. This is what we're finding, is they want lots of choice, not just obviously as having a 19-year-old daughter. You can imagine, it's choices everywhere. But I think people want choice as well, and not just maybe one facility. They might we're finding a lot of our sort of certainly boutique and independent facilities who maybe have opened a small studio. They were fearful of maybe for example, because it's linking obviously with Pilates, like a reformer Pilates studio opening down the road. And actually what they're finding is that people maybe might spend 1 or 2 sessions in one, then another. People actually want a choice. And I think sometimes maybe the industry doesn't always have to try and cater for everything, because we were talking about collaboration between brands, or maybe there's an element of that in terms of our associations with, Ian mentioned NHS, the sort of healthcare, people are becoming more health aware, and we are able to, as a fitness industry, cater for those people. But that also involves a huge collaboration with the National Health Service, for example, in terms of credibility and certainly scalability. But I also think that it's about staying true to what we are as human beings. We'll always want community. We always need to move. And if we can create environments or choice for people that hopefully then is beyond just maybe one single facility. Obviously, that's easier for us to say as a supplier, because we're able then to adapt our product for different facilities. The last thing I would say is, you mentioned the first question about sort of trends not going away. Recovery is, without a doubt, going to stay, because it transcends everything from post-COVID recovery at a fundamental health perspective level, and it also transcends into your younger generation, because when you look in elite sport now, recovery, regeneration and longevity is very, very topical as well. So I think that's certainly going to stay, and hopefully collectively we can define that better and maybe offer better solutions collectively.
Ian, would you add anything to changes in user behaviour and how you can adapt product offering, whether that's physical product or a club offering?
Yeah, I was going to just touch on the sort of the social aspect as well, in that, clubs could and perhaps should be doing more in terms of the social aspect, and then feeding people into social activities. So preparing people for a High Rocks event, preparing people, giving them educational workshops and stuff like that, so people can come to you as the font of knowledge, essentially, in terms of fitness, and doing more for consumers at that level, I think is really going to help with our credibility. And to your point about the NHS, that's where they're sort of fearful of actually signposting people to health clubs, because they're not necessarily confident that we can actually look after them, which then comes back to the other point about personal training. Our personal trainers do need to actually elevate in terms of their experience, and I think that's why we're seeing the rise of the personal trainer, and why we're seeing quality personal trainers being able to command a premium with their service. So all of that whole thing is, for me, is about leveling up. I think the industry is now leveling up, and it's still diversifying, but at the same time leveling up.
I would agree with you on the leveling up for sure. Ken, do you have anything to offer there?
Yeah, the one thing, and I'm not so sure that it really affects how we our business, is that we noticed that during COVID, a tremendous amount of our Pilates instructor clients started teaching Pilates online. And it actually kind of scared us, because we live on studio sales, and so we were worried about what was going to happen. And also we sold a lot of product to consumers at that point, and so we were worried what's going to happen after COVID. Fortunately, everything just kind of grew, and so if there was a surplus of instructors or training hours, it just got absorbed, because it seems like everybody's really busy right now. So that part worked out really, really well, and it seems like now, even though people are still teaching online, they're not teaching as much, but they're still teaching, and it's become part of the landscape. In terms of product sales, one of the things that we did change, and it not related to COVID, but more into the kind of our matriculation into the fitness world, is that we've changed our training program. So we have a training program for fitness professionals, which is more geared towards group exercise and reformer type classes, and not just kind of the whole, Pilates. Now I can't even think of the word for it, but the whole control Pilates program, which is a lot more complicated, but enough for people to teach in classes in clubs.
I think education can be, absolutely, it's something, obviously I know you do it at Powerplate, we do it at Keiser, we don't just sell a product, we try and sell education as well, so that people are not just taking equipment, they're actually going to use it, and it doesn't just sit there, and you kind of get PTs excited, and then hopefully get users excited as well. Ken, I'm going to stick with you, because I wanted to ask a specific question about independent gyms and trends, which is, Do you think there are specific advantages that independent facilities have when it comes to harnessing these trends? How do you think there's some advantage here with actually harnessing, capitalizing and implementing some of these trends we've discussed?
Huge. It's huge. We're a small business. The biggest advantage in boutique businesses is that the distance between the people that are on the front lines teaching and the people that are running the club, right, is really short. And so the owners know what's happening on the floor. The people on the floor know what the owners are thinking, and that just makes a huge difference. And then the other thing that I think makes a huge difference, and probably people here already know this, but I'm just going to say it again, is that, when you're in small business, you know how important agility is. You know how important it is that you can just make a decision and you can implement it right away. Like when we have a problem on a product that goes out, we just go outside into the shop and we can fix it, right? But if you're a big company and you've got to go overseas or talk to 10 layers up, nothing's ever going to happen. But in the independent world, you can make those changes right away. I one time went to a seminar. I was with a bunch of other CEOs, and we're all small companies, and we're all like, freaked out about big businesses coming and getting us and stuff. And he said, no, you got the one weapon that nobody else has, and it's a well-lubricated reverse, and you can change your mind really fast.
Just about to say, you can implement stuff, but you can also take it away if it isn't working, which is possibly more important.
Yeah.
You can stop it quickly.
It just makes a huge difference. And the other thing that I love about the boutique approach is, again, it's the focus that, it's really easy for the consumer to become familiar with the atmosphere faster and build those relationships faster, and to become more known and more important faster, right? And I think those are the things that really help people stick around in the business. And so those are my take on boutique business, on boutique studios.
Ian, you have huge experience in the operator arena. What would you say that some of the advantages are for?
I'll echo the agility that independent operators have, but perhaps maybe a little bit controversially, it's kind of like getting out of your world and actually sort of seeing what's out there. From an EMS perspective, I can still talk to people in the industry who I think know what EMS is, and I'm sure that 50% of the people will not know what's happening. Whereas in Germany, for example, that's 14% of all health clubs are actually have some EMS component integrated there, whereas in the UK we're only at a 2% penetration. So getting outside and actually looking to sort of see whether there are products out there is something I would really encourage you guys to do. And I know actually running a business myself how hard that can actually be, because you're in the day-to-day business.
So hard to spend time on your business when you're in it, right? So it's difficult.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing about the digital as well, I would really encourage people to start thinking about how to embrace digital more effectively. It's not going away. There's heaps of content that's being produced. How do you want to utilize that content around your product and your offering for your members to make it a more integrated experience? I'm seeing kids coming into the club, they're using their phones, they're obviously following someone's program. A lot of these providers actually have this available. It's just a case of us trying to embrace it. I remember in Germany with our, we were looking at virtual fitness, and my CEO at the time was just like, no, I don't want to touch it. It's all about having the experience and people coming to the classes. And I go to virtual studios and I only see 2 or 3 people doing it. As soon as COVID hit, it was pivot like crazy and get that digital solution in. And now post-COVID, it's kind of like, how do we continue to use digital to enhance the experience for people? And I think products that can actually provide a good educational platform and digital support is the ones that you should perhaps be looking at.
Steve, did you have any short? We're rapidly running out of time, but did you have any short bits?
No, I think they've said it all. I think all I would say is I just think there's huge opportunity and demand for that personal experience that an independent can offer. I think it's the right people. As long as you've identified your audience, we're finding again a lot of our independent studios as such. The people are coming back because they do want that face-to-face experience. They buy into the facility, the people, and I think that's something that hopefully should give everybody a lot of confidence going forward, that there's something about just being part of a small business whether we think about that in terms of how the economy are trying to support small businesses, I think that transcends into the fitness industry. People will spend a little bit more to go down to their boutique or their independent facility because they know that they're going to get looked after, because it's really, really important. And I think that hopefully should build confidence or keep confident, because I think that's fundamental as well.
That's really interesting. Last couple of questions. Ian, I'll go to you first. How important would you say it is for independent gyms to differentiate themselves from perhaps their competitors or other places around? Is it really important to have a real point of difference?
Clearly. Yeah, I mean, I think every club should try and think about what its point of difference is. I think as an independent, I would just sort of say, what's your point of difference against the big boxes? The David Lloyds, the Nuffields, etc. What are they doing? How can you differentiate yourself? And from my own perspective, looking at what we do at Colette's, it's actually the social aspect. I can do a fireworks evening, I can do a comedy event, and I can create social activity within my environment, which is not what perhaps a bigger box will do, because it's just too difficult or there's too much red tape to go through. So I think that's a superpower, if you like, and that is really what creates that community. And I think the independents also have what I'm seeing is family, that community, that family feel. So if you can do more to sort of keep people there longer. I've got a receptionist who's been in the business 15 years. I'm going to be celebrating someone tomorrow who's actually been in the business 20 years. Now, that I think is something that is a superpower for independence as well, if you can keep hold of people, for sure. But in terms of point of difference, again, I'll just come back to look at what is out there and recognize what is your niche and what your market's looking for. I'm not going to do high rocks, but I will definitely do active aging, because that's where my market's at, and I will do the best version of that, and we will, we'll focus on that. So be the best in your lane, in the particular niche that you go after.
Steve, would you agree? And is there something that I find as personally as a gym user and working in the industry interesting in terms of how you can physically keep people not just working there longer, but physically in that space longer? Like, can they come? Can they recover? Can they activate a bit more? Can they have a coffee afterwards? I don't know. Can you not only come? Can they just come in and just do a half an hour workout anymore? Can they actually spend more time in that space? Like, is that helpful?
Sure, I agree with what Ian said. I think so. To answer the latter question, because we talked about recovery at the beginning, I think if we were to ask most people what recovery often means to them, then it's kind of resting, i.e. I can sit at home, watch Netflix and not do anything. Whereas I think certainly if we can kind of flip that paradigm around, in the sense that there's working out and there's working in, both of which occur in the facility. Because if you can then have somebody coming to, maybe a third session or a fourth session a week for recovery, then they are going to be proactively doing something, which therefore means they're going to be in the club longer. They're in a club another day or another 2 days. And I think, without sort of going down the rabbit hole too much, I think then it's also about understanding what recovery would look like for your demographic, and not just, we're at a pivotal point where the risk is we become product and technology led and forget to zoom out and say, what would recovery look like in my space based on my demographic, as opposed to just follow the, which is a very upcoming trend, of just putting product in because somebody's doing cold water therapy and cryotherapy, or red light therapy, or red light and cryo with blood flow restriction all together. It's understanding what that looks like, but I think certainly if we can start to educate the customer and the trainers, of course, that actually this kind of working on yourself, the self-care component, and that can be done within the facility, that has huge opportunities to keep people more.
Some of those trends also, because I think often people see like people jumping into ice baths, and people like, I see it every morning and it makes me think I should do it, but I don't really understand why I should be doing it. I just see lots of people doing it. So I think with some of those trends that you've mentioned, it's important that they're there, but like you say, that education piece, people understanding why red light therapy can help, why cryo, what it actually does in terms of your fitness journey. And I think for me, that's the thing that's missing. Those products exist, but perhaps the education, the reason why, isn't quite landing yet. But maybe that's where independents have a real chance.
Yeah, and we've, from a power plate standpoint, very selfishly, is we've been talking about the benefits of vibration for preparation for years, and then we realise that people don't really understand what a warm-up is or why they should do it. So the first thing we have to do is do that part of the education, and then they will seek the right modality to get those results as efficiently as possible. I think the same applies now for recovery. Is we have to educate people on what recovery is. Obviously, you can't out foam roll poor sleep, for example. So we have to be authentic in our message to understand what recovery is, and then once we've defined that with our members or our demographic, then we can make sure we've got the right solutions that they are seeking out because we've created that element of education.
No, that's really interesting. And there's a final question. I'm going to start with Ken. As obviously as industry experts, is there specific, easy for you to say, advice that you would give to gym owners who really want to embrace these trends? We've kind of touched on it earlier, but is there just, one or two sentences to surmise really how independent fitness owners can capitalise these trends, implement in their business, and become really successful at them?
Got to think about that one. First of all, on the last question, I agree with Ian. Yeah. And the only thing, and Steve too, the only thing I would just want to add to that is that one really good way to differentiate yourself is to have a story for your business, a story that you can convey to your customers, and that'll not only differentiate you, but it'll give your customers something to talk about with their friends, and people love telling stories. So if you can give them a good story, and especially if it's true, it's really important. But in terms of the advice, right, is, I would just say really take the time to know your customers and to really understand what your customers want and to really understand what your customers need. And if you understand those two things, then it makes it a lot easier to give the customers, or actually to make them feel good about what they're doing and make them feel good about being in your business and make them feel good about giving you their money.
Find your niche. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. And do your customers want it? Secondly, benchmark yourselves against some of the best in the industry. See what they're doing. See what you can steal. See what you can replicate. And then check out as to whether it can be monetized. Because ultimately, you could be spending a lot of time, a lot of investment on a product. And I'm with you here, Steve. Don't go chasing the next shiny piece of equipment. Go for a product that actually is going to fit in your business and gives you a point of difference, and see how you can then get your return on that investment. Those would be my pointers.
You touched on earlier about demographic and researching your clientele. Could you give a few tips as to how you can do that effectively? Because obviously data research can be very expensive. Are there ways that you can actually properly research your demographic and what that looks like, and what data is useful?
Well, survey your customers first of all. I mean, ask the question of your customer base. Then I would probably suggest you kind of go to the industry leaders, the Minton reports, the information that from ACSM, for example, because it's not common sense. We don't all know that stuff is there and what those trends are, and then find a partner that you can actually trust, who you could work with to help you accelerate through that, so you can implement more effectively, whether that be an equipment supplier, whether that be a partner that you can trust in terms of what product to go with, and then let them help you. So they should be able to help you bring solutions into your business.
Last but not least.
I agree with what they've just said. Yeah, I said that. I had to get it in. And I think there's maybe what I would add is don't be afraid to look outside the industry, particularly at technology or trends, because sometimes we can be in our own lane to a degree. So I think certainly don't be afraid to look outside of the industry. That would be the one thing I would add.
Well, we met recently at the Health Optimization Show, which was maybe a week or so after
Elevate, right? Yeah.
And that was a much better show from my perspective in terms of what. That's okay, mate. But that was a much better show from my perspective in terms of what's actually happening in the industry and how that was informing my decision making. you're seeing a lot of alternative solutions out there, and you could see how they could then fit into your business rather than the same old solutions that you might see at an Elevate or a FIBO, which is another piece of resistance equipment, another hack squat, another piece of cardio equipment. If you're looking for inspiration, perhaps look outside the box.
And just do the due diligence, and don't be afraid to, one, do that, and two, I think kind of go to the source and spend a little bit of time and go to the source of whatever the area is or the technology is, which I think then you can make a much better informed decision around whether it's a suitable technology. And don't be product led, be concept and solution driven, and start with that.
Ken, I wondered if you could just close the panel before we open up for questions. We've got a few minutes of questions. Do you have any success stories of independents that have had, really good experience with implementing trends? Be lovely a lovely note to close on.
Yeah, we're fortunate enough. MK Fitness is right across the street from us. They're about a 20-plus-year-old company. They started off with fitness, and their owner went to the United States and saw Pilates, and this is 10 years after, so this is about 10 years ago. Implemented Pilates 10 years then. He's still got it. You guys can go see it. It's actually the same equipment that he had 10 years ago, and it's working great. And he's opened up a second operation, and he's also got Pilates in it too. So the thing that's exciting about me is he was probably one of the very first guys in this whole part of the country that brought on Pilates. And there are lots too. I can give you those, but
Ian, you've got about a minute if you've got any quick success stories.
So from an EMS perspective, I've had instructors who just wanted to start out with a small business, working from home, making some extra money there, and then seeing them go into actually running their own studio where they're doing group EMS and actually, creating their own brand. That was fantastic without much investment initially, because obviously from an overhead point of view, that was a risk to sort of move into a space. So that was great. And then actually from a big box perspective, having worked with the likes of Holmes Place, actually working with EMS operators in the market and actually bringing them into our club, a box-in-box solution where they're paying a healthy rent, and actually training my instructors at the same time as well. That was another example of how you can actually have another brand living with inside your brand. So again, the partnering thing can work.
Yeah, I think partnering and collaboration is absolutely vital. It really is. Any quick ones?
30 seconds, yeah. There's a Feel Good Fitness down south, just because I think it sort of epitomises what we've been talking about in terms of knowing your demographic. They, for me, have sort of, more than anybody I've experienced, broken the barrier with the NHS in terms of healthcare. They are literally a facility for everybody. They work with special populations, degenerative conditions, stroke victims, and it just feels like home for those people, and their testimonials and how they talk about the staff and the company is inspiring. But I think it's probably one of the best examples I could give about understanding your demographic, being brave, that when you get into that health medical area, is it okay to start dealing with customers that have had a stroke? Well, actually, yes, because all they want to do is maybe move a little bit and have some community, feel better about themselves. So that's a great example, Feel Good Fitness.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so we've got some time for questions. If anyone would like to ask any questions, now is the time. Maddie, go for it.
Just to your point actually about big box concepts offering boutique, I think it's a fantastic idea to collaborate where possible. What are your thoughts on big boxes that perhaps have that boutique style concept? Do you think it's a good idea because it means they're diversifying and perhaps getting an audience they might not already? Or do you think there's risk attached to it because they might not be able to get the same sense of community, the personalisation we might expect from an independent or boutique?
I'm trying to think of a political answer to say here, because,
Yes, I agree.
I have seen it work successfully. I was, to give you an example, in Germany with Holmes Place, we were starting to create products like Storm, which was our own box-in-box solution, which is similar to Tribe and stuff like that. So bringing that in-house and sort of creating our own brand and then taking that externally, that's worked very, very successfully. we were also quite lucky to have been, and I know that this is a dirty word, but we were working with the aggregators as well, and we were seeing that the aggregator market were looking for that type of workout. So again, the demographic was changing within our own market, so we had to respond to that and then create this extra product. So I definitely think it can work. The EMS solution, again, recognizing what's relevant, what's in the market right now, and then bringing that expertise in rather than just doing it yourself. It's actually it's a safer option. That's really, from a big box perspective, that's much more difficult perhaps for an independent to bring someone in because perhaps they don't have the clout, but definitely can work. You just need to be sure about whether it's the right fit.
Anybody else? Oh, Simon?
Would you charge extra for that? Because obviously boutique is obviously a small kind of centre, which is a highly paid kind of centre as well. It's more expensive.
Yeah.
How do you see that working? Because obviously, so for example, everyone acting will do Fortis, which is Speedflex, and then charge extra for that class to be a member as well. Do you see that as a good way of doing it? So therefore, you'll put in like a boutique sector into a big box. So you kind of feel like what you're saying.
Well, I wonder what boutique means to a lot of people, and I think boutique actually, for me, is a little bit more premium, it's a little bit more luxury, and therefore there's probably a little bit more of a higher price point. So in answer to the simple answer to the question is yes, I think it's right, provided that you've got the right programming and the right education and the right experience around it to justify why you should be charging more. And I think that's where a lot of people go astray, because actually they don't make it a premium experience, and therefore the customer is questioning what your motivation is.
There was a question over here. Yes. You.
Just thinking about what I call sort of joined-up fitness, so enabling fit consumers to have, not necessarily the same, but an even experience in facility and at home and in other places, probably utilising tech. I'm thinking people like, so at home I've got a hydro rowing machine and a TRX suspension training machine, TRX suspension training kit, but I have got a gym local to me, which using their app would allow me to keep the dashboard going and all that stuff. Have you guys got any good sort of case studies of that stuff being done well? I think it's the future, by the way.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Your home gym sounds fantastic, by the way.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, from my perspective, no actual case studies, but lots of times people will take classes at home virtually and they'll come to a studio and they'll just do both. And then we also see people taking virtual classes in places far away, like, in other countries even. So, and it seems to all kind of mix together and it seems to work fairly well.
Yeah, for me, it's first of all about embracing that, recognizing that that is what the consumer will do anyway. So actually being ahead of that, so finding a solution that works for them and that also works for your club, so that it's joined up. We can't put our head in the sand and just sort of say it's not happening. It is. It's just a case of how you can integrate it into your own business, and that's where it needs some sort of thought and consideration in terms of the journey that you want them to have and how you want to communicate with them.
My observation around COVID was that a lot of the big box guys did apps very quickly and allowed people to train at home out of necessity. But actually that was a massive opportunity. I don't see anybody really using that as a market-leading strategy from what I can see. Sorry,
No, I think it's about maybe being brave to do that as a strategy. I think it was necessity. I certainly think and I couldn't give specific case studies, but certainly was two parts. I think a lot of boutique and independents did that, but then have also maintained that hybrid model for that reason, and are charging a subscription model, whereby then they've got a member going into the facility, but also training from home, and accessing that content. I think part of the challenge is, what does that content look like in relation to the quality of it? I know we've got Richard at the back, who's a content creator. Hi, Richard. But I think it's interesting because then, are people going to pay in COVID? There was no distinguishable level between an iPhone on Zoom with a laptop versus 4 cameras. I think now, if is an opportunity, then I think it certainly is an opportunity. But then there's the definition of what does that content look like that you're able to create, and are you able to sustain it and scale it? Because certainly then you're going to maintain probably a wider member demographic, but you have to be able to sustain that level of content production or expectation. And I think that's part of the reason why you don't see it as commonplace things to do, because it takes more now, because people's perceptions have changed on what content creation is. And that's what we found from a PowerPlate standpoint, doing a lot of business direct to consumer, is, you know, we have to offer a much better service now to our customers that are buying product at home. You know, they have a consultation with one of our trainers for free, and we have to onboard them in the same way that we would expect and hope a customer or a supplier would do in gym. But actually the opportunity, certainly from a supplier standpoint, we would be very keen, and we try to work with operators who want to maybe offer that hybrid model to support, because we have the content. So therefore, again, it comes back to maybe collaboration, but I certainly think a distinguish between the what premium content is very important as well, which is partly why maybe you see it's a scary place to be.
We have time for, I think, one more question maybe. Yeah, go for it.
It's kind of a follow-up from your question, if that's okay. So we've got a current landscape of, so we're based in London. A lot of these boutique style studios in 45. David Lloyd tried to launch some Blaze standalone studios that didn't really take. And F45 is a case study. Since their IPO, their share price has absolutely tanked. It's bottomed out under $1 now. So, given the current trends, how do you see the next sort of like 5 years of boutique gyms competing versus those type of facilities?
Big question for 30 seconds. I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation, personally. I think there's a lot of poor experiences out there in terms of boutique, and I don't think they're differentiated enough, and they're easily copied. So I would be choosing, if you're partnering or if you're looking at doing your own, I'd be looking at, you know, something that really differentiates you and that is sustainable, and be investing in the quality of the education and the experience. Because for me, F45, I mean, I might sound a sort of bit outspoken, is circuit training, and if it's not managed well as a circuit training experience, it's just exactly that. So, you know, but if it's led with a great instructor who commands the audience, those customers are going to keep coming back for that experience. So it's not so much about the brand; it's actually about the trainer, the leader of that, and the concept that you're trying to get across.
All right. Exactly 45 minutes and 4 seconds. Thank you. Guys, thank you. So our panelists, thank you. Thank you.